Oh, yeah, they're pretty rickety.
Yeah. Well, they go back when I was.
That's right, yeah.
You're so funny. Ladies and gentlemen, are everybody ready?
Yes.
Oops. I'd like to open the Village of Vernon Joint Village Board and Plan Commission meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag and a moment of silence?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Brad, would you please do the roll call and open meeting compliance?
President Shu.
I'm here.
Trustee Slotty, excuse. Trustee Finch.
Here.
Trustee Newman.
Present.
Trustee Millies.
Here.
Commissioner Nowak.
Present.
Commissioner Rinaldi.
Present.
Commissioner Alex.
Present.
This meeting was noticed and posted according to law.
Thank you, Brad. First of all, I wanted to welcome Mike Alex. He's our newest Plan Commission member. Michael comes with, Mike, I call him Michael, and he says, my mom calls me Michael. Comes with a lot of experience from other municipalities, a lot of experience with Plan Commission, Board of Appeals. So welcome, Mike. And Dan, thank you for going for another 2 years on the Plan Commission. I want to thank you, gentlemen, with a little quick round of applause. Right now, I'm going to open the public hearing, and then after I open the public hearing, I'm going to ask the people that are representing the porters to come to the table, and then we'll start everything. But just let me read the public notice, and then I'm going to have you come forward. Does that sound good? Alrighty. The notice is hereby given at a joint public hearing by the Village of Vernon Board and the Village of Vernon Plan Commission will be held on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Village Hall located at W249 South 8910 Center Drive to consider the request for the property owned by Porterville LLC. The applicants, Robert Porter and Ellen McKenzie, for the property located at South 103 West 26420 Maple Avenue, McGuanago in the Village of Vernon at 53149. Identified by the property tax key numbers VNT 2141998, 2132999, to amend the Village of Vernon zoning map. The rezoning specifically includes a portion of Lot 1, a 5.02 acre parcel of a proposed certified survey map from agricultural density district 10 acres, AD 10, to rural residential density district 5 acre RRD 5, and also a portion of Lot 3, an 82.96 acre parcel of the proposed certified survey map from rural residential density 5 acre RRD 5 to agricultural density district 10 acres AD 10. For any questions in regards to this public hearing, you were to contact the Village Hall. This was published in the the Freeman on April 26th and May 3rd, and posted in the Village of Vernon on the 24th. And so now, as I open the public hearing, would the representatives from the porters please come to this table forward? And then what's going to happen, Ellen, Bob, and Tim, I don't know if you're coming up too. What's going to happen is, our planner, Sean Malarkey, is going to give a report, and then we'll proceed from there. So Sean Malarkey, our planner, would you brief us all on the petitioner's request?
Sure, thank you. This project goes back to August of last year. At that time, the petitioner submitted a conceptual certified survey map to create a single 5 acre lot from basically two lots. Or was I going to swap over? I'm sorry, I just was thinking about plugging in. Did we talk about that? I'm not sure that's possible. Let's see.
We just, what Sean's doing is, as he's speaking, he's going to shoot up some of the pictures so that people that are on TV or watching can see what he's speaking of. So
Yeah, there it is. So if you flip over, we should be good to go. Is there something I need to do on my end? It's plugged in. No, that's not it. Should be there. Hang on. Well, we can, we can go without it, obviously, but I'll continue here, and if you can figure it out, that'd be great. So, what they're asking for, the purpose of the rezoning is because of a land division. There's two properties along Maple Avenue. One is along the roadway that's about 7 acres, and the one to the north, 81.4 acres. The 81.4 acre lot is currently zoned AD10, ag density 10 acre, and then the smaller 7 acre lot is currently zoned RRD5, rural residential 5 acre. These zoning districts are very, very similar to each other. You can have lots as small as 1 acre in both of the districts. However, the gross densities are limited differently. One requires 10 acres for every unit you create, and the other requires 5 acres for every unit you create. Everything else is essentially the same. Back in August, and I'm going to touch on the certified survey map here a bit going through this because it's all tied together. Back in August, we looked at that 5 acre lot concept. At the time, the Plan Commission provided feedback, mentioned that the layout was acceptable. There are 2 smaller lots that exist along Maple Avenue that are also owned by members of Porterville. At least one of them are related to the family. And the Plan Commission at the time suggested that because those lots were smaller than an acre, that it might be a good idea to take a look at them as part of the land division to see if the size could be adjusted to make them conforming, bring them up to an acre or not. It wasn't a deal breaker if it couldn't be done, but at least the suggestion was made to take a look at that. And then we took a look at some of the accessory buildings in the property. The property that will be included in the 5 acre parcel has a number of existing buildings. There's a house there and a series of accessory buildings. And at the time, the petitioner was talking about or requesting to keep the existing garage, which happens to be attached to the house and is not a separate accessory building. The mechanics building and the shed at the time was talked about keeping all those. There's a map that goes along with my staff report that was put together back then. So essentially building 1, building 2, and building 5 were to be kept. So that was just the first kick at the cat. We knew that the rezoning was going to be required to match lot lines, essentially, as that 5 acre lot was created and poked up into the 10 acre parcel. We knew that that would have to be rezoned to be consistent across the parcels that were being created. Then in November 2022, the petitioner came back with a revised concept where instead of a 5 acre lot to be created, it would be a 10 acre lot. Again, the Plan Commission thought it was an acceptable layout. We talked about the accessory buildings. There was note by the Plan Commission at the time that two detached accessory buildings and possibly 3 at the time, which could include the barn, could be considered to be kept. Currently, there's a provision in the ordinance that requires, that limits residential accessory buildings to no more than 2, and so that there have to be a waiver granted for anything beyond 2. And anything that exceeded the total square footage requirement as well would need to be granted as well. So there was no guarantees given at the time for a waiver, but it was noted that that would be required. So now that takes care of the previous meetings. Now the petitioner's back and requesting the rezoning to go along with a certified survey map, a final certified survey map. The petitioner's back to the original 5 acre certified survey map with slight tweaks to it. Lot 1 is a 5.02 acre lot that includes the house and the outbuildings. Lot 2 is an expansion of the existing non-conforming small lot to the west. Again, that's currently less than an acre. They'd be expanding that lot to be 2 acres. The other eastern small lot is not being adjusted. And Lot 3 essentially would be the remnant parcel to the north, and then that wraps around the side of the 5 acre parcel. That happens to be 82.96 acres. So again, the entirety of the 5 acre parcel would have to be rezoned to RRD5. A portion's currently zoned RRD5, and then the big remnant parcel, the 82.96, the entirety of that would be zoned AD10, where the majority of that is currently zoned AD10. What's being requested is compatible with the comprehensive plan. The comp plan has the area plan, these properties and surrounding properties as rural residential, which is a minimum gross density of 5 acres for every dwelling unit. So that's not a problem. I mentioned the portions that would be rezoned. All the setbacks that would be required as part of the new land division is okay. RRD5 and AD10 both require a 20-foot offset from side and rear property lines. So nothing that is, no currently legal non-conforming side or rear yard offsets would be reduced as part of this, so that's fine. There is an existing small shed, 100 square foot shed that's currently on the larger property that would end up on lot 2, that 1 acre property that's being expanded. It's only about 6 feet from the east property line. However, the ordinance allows one detached accessory building less on a lot that's less than 1.5 acres to be no more than 5 or no closer than 5 feet to the side or rear lot line. So that is okay there as well. We looked at the lot configuration in previous conceptual reviews. Again, the Plan Commission was okay with the layout, but wanted to caution the petitioner that because of the division, the property on the west, the strip of land on the west may not be suitable for future homes. So it may not be possible that there'd be further development of the west portion of the property, but the petitioner is aware of that. There certainly would be access available on the west side, and it's the petitioner's intent to provide access now through an easement to a landlocked parcel owned by the Porter brothers further to the north and the west. I won't get into the details of the accessory buildings now. We can talk about that when we get to the certified survey map request and the waiver provisions. And so I think I'll leave it at that for the rezoning. If there's questions, I'd be happy to answer, but again, I'll get into the details of the CSM and the accessory buildings on those items.
Thank you, Sean. Now, Ellen, are you going to be the spokesperson or Mr.? What I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, whoever speaks, just state your name and address so that we can record that for the record. And what we'll do is whoever's speaking on behalf of your application, we'll take all your comments first and then we'll open it up to the audience as well. But if you could just identify yourself for the record, just state your name and address.
Yes, I'm Ellen Porter McKenzie, and my address is 158 Walnut Creek Crossing, Avon, Indiana.
Perfect. And Ellen, is Mr. Porter or Tim speaking at all?
They could be. Are you going to be speaking tonight?
Could be.
Could be, yes.
Okay.
Your name and address.
My name is Robert Porter. I live at S103 W26420 Maple Avenue.
Thanks, Mr. Porter. And then Tim, if you decide to speak, we'll just identify you then. But what we'll do for now, Ellen and Mr. Porter, Sean gave an overview of the history that relates to this application and your application as it relates to just the zoning at this point. Is there anything you'd like to add, or do you think there's something that Sean didn't cover for the zoning, or anything you'd like to say at this point?
Well, I'd read that there should be a petitioner's response, and I was taking that to mean that I was to give kind of a synopsis of everything, kind of an overview of what we were asking the commission to do. Sean covered it beautifully. There was not anything that I felt, was being missed. I did see something that and it was Mr. Macy's report. So when Mr. Macy made, and I found it problematic, he said in his statement, originally the petitioner had agreed to remove the buildings prior to signing of the certified survey map, but now has asked that other options be allowed. In my mind, that did not happen, so I just really would like, some, that statement to be made on record.
Okay. Ellen, anything else you'd like to add at this point? I mean, we'll have more discussion, but
Surely.
anything else at this point, or Mr. Porter? Then what I'd like to do is ask the Plan Commission or board members if you have any questions of Sean's report or questions for the Porters. I know if they don't ask a lot of questions, Ellen and Mr. Porter, you know that some of the commission members and board members are well-versed on this, but is there any questions for Sean or for the Porters as it relates to the rezoning? Okay, we'll note for the record that there's no questions from the Plan Commission or the Village Board. What I'd like to do right now, is there anybody in the public that's sitting in the rows back there? Is any public comments that would like to be made in regards to this request? Then I
would make a comment. My name is Amy Steinhauer. I live at S101 W25600 Maple Avenue. And it's more of a general comment. Our rural properties are going to continue to be developed, and I would just like to ask the board and the commission to be aware of that and support that, supporting landowner rights. These are families that have been in our community for multiple generations, and I think it's important to accommodate that.
Thank you, Amy. Any other comments? I'll just note for the record that there's no public comments at this point. Once again, just one more time, bring it back to the Plan Commissioner board members for comments as it relates to the rezoning. Sean, there's no other comments. So, Sean, is there anything you think we should add?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I do have a motion here prepared for the rezoning, and the items that are in there, there's a couple conditions. One is that the rezoning shall not be in full force and effect until such time the petitioner obtains approval from the village and records with the Waukesha County Register of Deeds the proposed 3-lot certified survey map, which is another item on the agenda tonight. Lots within the proposed certified survey map shall be rezoned as follows. A portion, approximately 2.75 acres of proposed Lot 1, shall be rezoned from AD10 to RRD5, so the entire 5.02 acre lot is zoned RRD5. And then portions, approximately 4.09 acres of proposed Lot 3 shall be rezoned from RRD5 to AD10, so the entire 82.96 acre lot is zoned AD10. And then finally, just the reimbursement of costs. So those are the only conditions I have.
Okay. Is there any questions in regards to Sean's recommended motion? There are no questions. So what I'll do at this point is close the public hearing. And then we'll go on to agenda item number 6. This is discussion and possible action for the property owned by Porterville LLC, applicant Robert Porter and Ellen McKenzie for the property that I just stated earlier. Tax key numbers VNT 2141998, 2132998, to amend the Village of Vernon zoning map. And Sean, you want me to repeat everything that I just said previously? I mean, this
It
action.
could be subject to the conditions in the planner report.
Okay, so what we're doing right now, Plan Commission members, Sean, do you think you need to add anything on the planner report on this agenda item?
No.
Okay. Ellen or Bob, do you think what the Plan Commission board are going to be discussing now is the rezoning only? Is there anything that you wanted to add to the Plan Commission or board before they go into discussion and possibly act on this item?
Well, yes, and that's already, I think, been changed because Sean said that in his opening statement. I guess there's one thing that I want to say, because I know that there's consideration of waivers and so on with this. And I want to just talk a little bit, and it's going to be brief, but it's on integrity. My dad, there's a profile of him in the entryway, and he served on, it was then known as the Village Board, and the Vernon Board, I'm sorry, and he served on it for about 42 years. And then my brother, Hugh, was on also the Vernon Board, and he served for about 15 years. So obviously, they had a lot to do with the involvement of Vernon. I just want to make it very clear that my mother and dad were all about integrity, and we were all raised with integrity. And so it is a thread that goes through all of our families. So if we say that we are going to do particular things, such as taking down the silos and removing the grain bins, it will be done. It is all about integrity. So I just wanted to make that statement from the very beginning.
Any comments from the Plan Commissioner Board? Ellen, I just have to say, I didn't know your father, but I knew your brother Hugh in fact, he's one of the people that got me involved in politics. Thank you, Hugh. And Marge, so I just wanted to say, I didn't know your father. I've read about some of the history, but I'm sorry, that off cue, but any other comments from the Plan Commission or board members? Hearing none, is there a motion? What Sean had said on his his planner comments on page 6 is the motion that would be made, and what we would need is a motion from the Plan Commission making a recommendation to the village board, and then the village board acting upon the recommendation from the Plan Commission. So is there a motion from the Plan Commission based upon the items that Sean stated in regards to the rezoning request?
I will make a motion to approve to the town board or village board, the resolution approving this with the conditions as stated by Sean, numbers 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second to Commissioner Nowak's motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Rinaldi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, and opposed, motion carries. And now I would ask the village board members, you heard the Plan Commission's recommendation. Your motion would be concurring with the Plan Commission's recommendations based upon the conditions that they set forth. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Newman made the motion. Is there a second to Trustee Newman's? Trustee Finch, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So Sean, now we're moving on. The rezoning is done. Now we are moving on to the certified survey map. Sean, did you want to give an overview of the certified survey map?
Yeah, I think I touched on the basics. There's a couple other points, and I wish the projector could work.
I would do
so
too.
I could talk to it.
Well,
But that's fine. Again, we've been over the configuration. I just wanted to read the fact that, this 5-acre lot does pinch off a piece of the property to the west. It's unknown based on the topography and the conditions on the west side if you'll be able to get a road, and then also lots directly adjacent to it. The petitioner is not concerned with that. There's obviously multiple ways to get roads back to the back of the property for further development, but that was something the Plan Commission wanted to be have the petitioner aware of. I'll talk a little bit more about the accessory buildings on the property now, because the waiver does tie into the certified survey map request. I know there are separate items on the agenda, but approving the certified survey map is related to those waivers. And so, again, there's a map that should have been part of my staff report that shows a bunch of numbering on it. There's like 13 numbers. Number 1 is the house, and then number 13 is the house, and then the rest are accessory buildings. Some are attached and some are detached. Essentially, what the petitioner wants to do is keep a number of buildings. There's 3 accessory buildings that are detached that will remain. Building 1, which is a 1,400 square foot shed, will remain. Building 2, the 555 square foot garage, which is actually attached to the house and doesn't count as a separate accessory building. Building 5, 2,400 square foot mechanics building. Building 7, which is the 4,320 square foot barn that includes 2 attached silos and the milk house. Again, they're all attached, so it's one structure. And then the existing home. Everything else would be removed, which includes buildings 3 and 4, 2 grain bins. The petitioner mentioned that they'd be removed in spring 2023. And then the 2 detached silos, which are buildings 9 and 11, which would be removed within 6 months. Building 12 is, again, as I mentioned, is no longer going to be on the property. That'll be on proposed Lot 2 that was expanded. So in my approval conditions, in the certified survey map approval conditions, I do include a condition for the assurance of the removal of the 4 structures, the 2 grain bins and the 2 silos. This was talked about in the past by the Plan Commission. It's a financial assurance that those would be removed by basically the dates that the petitioner suggested. One would be yeah, that's right. June 21st, which is essentially the first day of summer, and then 6 months from the approval of the CSM by the board. In order to allow any more than 2 buildings, so there would essentially be 3 accessory buildings in the property, the Plan Commission would need to grant a waiver. That's Plan Commission only item, not the board. And the Plan Commission would need to decide essentially which of those conditions will be required. Again, those are conditions in the actual waiver itself. The CSM approval would essentially would include the waiver and then also include actual approval of the waiver through that approval process. There's one other thing that has to be approved as part of the CSM from the Plan Commission, and that would be a wetland delineation waiver. Essentially, there are wetlands on Lot 3, the large undeveloped lot, or the one that will not be currently developed. These waivers have been granted in the past when there's no development plans for a particular lot, so the petitioner is requesting a waiver from delineation of those wetlands. Our surveyor does have a few minor technical comments that I won't go into now. Those will just have to be addressed by your surveyor before it gets signed and recorded. So with that, I do have the conditions that I have for the certified survey map approval include satisfying all conditions of the Plan Commission, board, planner, and surveyor, obtain approval of the rezoning, which has already been done, obtain approval of the waiver from the Plan Commission of the Village Code of Ordinances for the quantity of accessory buildings exceeding 2 and the total size of accessory buildings exceeding 3% of the lot area. Again, the waiver will be a separate item tonight. And then a note referencing the wetland delineation waiver granted by the Plan Commission shall be added to the certified survey map if that delineation waiver is approved. And that wetland delineation has to happen as part of the CSM, not as part of the waiver for the accessory buildings. And then finally, the standard reimbursement cost is attached. So that's all I have. Essentially, it's now that the rezoning is approved, it's fairly straightforward in terms of granting approval of the CSM.
Thank you, Sean. Ellen or Bob, is there anything you need to add in regards to the certified survey map? Any comments that Sean has made before we go to the Plan Commission and the board?
And I just would add, sorry to interrupt, the issues regarding the financial assurances and so on, those will be handled in the waiver portion of this and not the certified survey map portion of this.
Can you give us any kind of an idea of the financial, you talking financial part, what you will be billing us for? Are you?
No. So essentially what's been discussed with the Plan Commission in the past is that, so the buildings you're proposing to remove, that a waiver will not be granted for, the 2 grain bins and the 2 silos, that there'd be a financial guarantee, such as a bond or a letter of credit or something like that. And that's been done in the past where we've approved something and required something to come down in its stead or as part of an approval. That would be related to the cost of removal. So someone would do an estimate of the cost of removing those buildings. The village would verify that, and you'd basically put up money that says if it's not removed by this such and such a date, the village would have the right to basically use those monies to take it down. And I think what the attorney mentioned was that also probably should include some easement on the property that allows the village to actually enter the property and take it down. Now, if you would, if you're going to say you would have those removed prior to actually signing and recording the CSM, it'd be a moot point, right? It wouldn't matter. If you could take them down before the CSM's actually signed and recorded, that would no longer be an issue. So, but again, that waiver is another agenda item. We're just talking about the certified survey map, including the waiver for the wetland delineation. So that has to be talked about.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Yes.
Ellen or Bob, any questions for Sean or any comments? And then what I'd like to do is ask the Plan Commission or the board if they have any questions for Sean. Any concerns? And Ellen, and Bob, I just wanted to state, I've been around here for a while, and the bond that he's talking about, we have somebody on our board right now that we're holding a bond for to make sure a building comes down. It's a normal thing that we do. We've never cashed one, although we don't have an easement on your
Right.
property.
No, that's true. But again, it's a moot point if you can get that off the properties prior to this being signed and recorded. So that would make it easier.
So any questions for Sean before we get into the waiver portion of the discussion? Any comments Plan Commission members would like to make? Mike?
My only question would be probably for Sean. Is there a distinction between a rural structure and a rural building? You know, a grain silo being called a building versus a structure. Is there,
If it's got a roof on it, it's a building, according to our definition in the code. So there is a provision in the code about rural structures and so on, but those were specifically tied to a map and basically in the farmland preservation areas in the town and now the village. And so those did have certain protections. This is not part of that particular area. So it doesn't get any special protections. It is a building. It's a building if it's got a roof on it, regardless.
So Sean, the Porterville property is not in any of that yellow, that was a map that we did of, farmlands in Vernon?
If it is, it could be. I was told it was
It's
not.
in there.
It is in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
the only reason I asked Sean, I don't even know, I know John the attorney is aware of it, I know Vince is aware of it, but I know, this is years ago when we were doing the master plan, that map we used, because that was, although there's farmland throughout Vernon, that farmland there was like our prime farmland, and there was different provisions.
Sure. No, if that's the case, that's a good point. I wasn't aware. In fact, I've been told it wasn't in there, but let me take a look at what that means.
Mr. Craig, you said it's in there. Okay. Yeah, because it's a special overlay, Sean.
Because that's Maple Avenue by 20
Right, and so I'm going to look at the standards for accessory buildings to see what that means for them.
So I think it is in that, either lot 20, it's in lot 27, but just to the right, that little square yellow.
And if Mr. Craig says it's in there, it's in there.
Yeah, no, I'm not doubting it.
He was a baby when we did that map, but he was
No, I was like
4.
28 or something.
So it basically says on parcels of 3 or more acres in size, more than 2 accessory buildings may be permitted when the village board, upon consideration of a recommendation of the Plan Commission, makes all the following findings. There are 1 or more rural structures as defined on the property. So if they're rural structures, you can consider a waiver for them. So that essentially doesn't change the fact that it still needs a waiver, but that's one of the considerations, or a good consideration to consider a waiver.
Any other questions or comments from the Plan Commission or board? There are none. So Sean, you think that what they need to do is the delineation on,
So they don't need, I'm suggesting they don't delineate the wetland because there's no development on that larger lot now. If and when it ever is proposed for development, we'd request a delineation then because it's bound to move over a period of time anyway, so it doesn't really make any sense to delineate the wetland on that lot now.
and does the Plan Commission, can they do this by consensus, or do they have to have a formal motion in regards to their determination on the delineation?
So the waiver delineation, or the waiver process, that's the land division ordinance waiver process, which is different than the zoning. It's pretty silent on it, so it could be part of the motion. And in fact, I think that's how I have it in my
Yeah, so
staff
what I was
report.
going to do, Sean, is, I'm sure they've seen it in the notes. I just wanted to ask the Plan Commission A through E to see if there's any objection or any concerns as it relates to that wetland delineation. And I know they're familiar with this because we did it on the Simon property and the Brent property, the properties that surround the Porterville
Right.
properties.
It's generally been granted when it's a large undeveloped property.
Right. So Plan Commission, I'm going to ask you whether this request for a waiver of modification, if granted, should be consistent with the general intent of the chapter. Plan Commission, do you agree with that? There's a consensus of yes, and whether the request or waiver modification, if granted, would adversely affect property owners in the surrounding areas? Do you believe that it would adversely affect? There's a consensus of no. Would it benefit the petitioner's project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village interests? There's all three no's, okay. And then whether petition is in full compliance with applicable ordinance and agreements with the village? To the best of their knowledge, they're saying yes. And whether instead of granting the interest or waiver for modification that in this chapter itself should be changed to modify this kind of situation presented by the petitioner. No, we wouldn't change. So, Sean, I'll just note for the record, we don't have to do a motion, but the Plan Commission absolutely did grant the waiver, the wetland delineation waiver.
Great. So then the motion so the waiver's been granted, and so it just would be a motion for recommendation of approval of the certified survey map to the village board, including my conditions,
The
which are
five conditions, Sean?
which is the 5 conditions of my staff report, right?
So on page 5 of Sean's planning comments, there is a motion. Is there a motion from the Plan Commission to either approve or not approve the certified survey map with the 5 conditions as stated by the planner? Oh, they're looking to you, Mike.
I make that motion with the 5 recommendations from the planner.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Commissioner, I heard Commissioner Rinaldi. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Can I turn to the village board now and ask them? Village board members, you heard the Plan Commission's recommendation to you in regards to approval of the certified survey map as stated on the agenda with the 5 conditions stated by the planner. Is there a motion to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendation? Trustee Newman is making the motion. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Trustee Finch. Discussion on the motion. Discussion, hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay, now Sean,
So now under the waiver?
I'm going the way.
Okay, so the last piece, and I think we touched on it pretty well, on page 7 of my staff report is the accessory building waiver request sample motion here. Essentially, the waiver would be to allow for a total of 3 accessory buildings totaling 9,011 square feet for proposed lot 1 for the petitioner. The conditions I have, as I mentioned, the petitioner property owner shall remove the grain bins, building 3 and 4 by June 21st, 2023, and the 2 detached silos, buildings 9 and 11, within 6 months of approval of the CSM. By the village board, the petitioner or property owner shall obtain raised permits from the village of Vernon if required. And then my second condition, based on discussions that have happened with the Plan Commission prior, the petitioner shall enter into agreement with the village of Vernon, subject to review by the village attorney, providing financial assurance for removal of the grain bins and the 2 silos, and allowing the village of Vernon to enter the property and remove the buildings at the petitioner's expense, if not completed by the dates established in condition number, it says 3, it should be number 1. And so those are the only conditions that I have. The other thing that was talked about in the past was also, some of these buildings are in disrepair. I know the petitioner has presented something about the barn, a structure report last year, so we have that. I think it's part of the packets. I'm not sure the condition of the other buildings, but it was discussed in the past about bringing those up to some sort of condition or not. Again, I don't have a condition written in here that requires that, or a financial assurance to bring them up to condition, and whether or not that would even be something that you would want to entertain. But I just wanted to mention it. It was something that was talked about before. You don't have to stipulate anything as part of this waiver. You can grant the waiver for this, these 3 accessory buildings without any other conditions at all on here, but they're here for your consideration, so I leave it with you.
And then Sean, this is just a Plan Commission action?
The waiver from the accessory buildings is just the Plan Commission action, right?
Okay. And then your motion, well, maybe I should go through the waiver to see if they're in compliance with how the Plan Commission feels about the waiver. Plan Commission members, on item number 1, all these are whether the request of the waiver modification, if granted, would it be consistent with the general intent of the chapter? Plan Commission members, they all agree? Would it adversely affect other property around, property owners in the surrounding area? That's a no. Would the request benefit the petitioner's project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village's interest? Okay, and is the petitioner in full compliance with applicable ordinances and agreements with the village? That's yes. And then, do you feel that the chapter itself should be changed to accommodate this type of situation presented by the petitioner? And that's a no. So, Sean, the Plan Commission has made a recommendation unanimously to grant the waiver.
Is any discussion on the conditions
Yeah.
and what conditions you would require? Would you like to leave it as is? Would you like to modify the
Dan?
conditions?
How do we establish an amount for the financial assurance?
Someone would have to estimate the removal. And so essentially this ends up in the village's hands in terms of approval of the form. So they could have someone estimate it and we could have Vince concur, take a look at it. We could do it or Vince could do it, one of the two.
That's typically what's always happened in the past, is the petitioners work with the building inspector. Sometimes they need Vince's help, but they work together on an agreed upon amount. They work with the petitioners.
Okay.
Mario?
I have a generic question. It doesn't relate to your.
Mario, can you speak into your microphone, dear? Everybody wants to hear you.
Yeah. So we always use the terminology removal of a building. I assume then that somebody couldn't just topple over a building and consider it removed.
It wouldn't be removed from the site. It would be,
Because a bunch of debris would be worse than a.
That's right.
so you would, shall remove, well, how would you, no, I mean, we could tighten it up. We certainly could tighten it up. So shall remove the buildings and all materials associated with the buildings?
Don't change the words here, not for me. It's my own edification of terminology.
Okay.
Dan?
Leave that up to the building inspector.
I was gonna say Vince, I think he had the village engineer as well. He took his take on mine, because I think I got a quote for $1,200 and my bond ended up being 2,000 something.
Yeah, the last one we did was a barn for 5,000, a old barn. And to be perfectly honest, the village, well, it was a town back then, we forgot about it. But then one of the neighbors said, hey, wasn't that supposed to be? And then the petitioner probably forgot also, and they took it down and everything was fine. We didn't have any problems with access or cashing the bond, Mike?
Two questions, and this one is probably for the petitioners. It's putting a date of June 21st of 2023. Is that enough time to have the buildings, because that's talking about buildings 3 and 4?
And those are the grain bins.
Those are the grain bins, and they are in the process of taking them down now. They started last week, and I got a gentleman that's interested in them, so he's coordinated everything to dismantle them, and he's gonna put them up on a different site up in Boston or something like that. So that's in the process. I'm hoping he'll have it done by the 21st, but I don't control his time, so.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I would say, if it's a matter of us giving them more time and having it triggered towards the execution of the CSM or within 6 months like the other is. And the other thing that I would ask is, do we need to add any type of language that says they only have to pay if the buildings remain? It seems obvious to say
Yeah.
you're not going to put up a bond for buildings that aren't there, but knowing that legal can be legal, how do we make sure that that's
Yeah, good points. I would agree with you. I think we should extend the condition that says this no longer applies if the buildings are removed prior to recording of the CSM. And then would you be opposed to just extending it all to 6 months? Remove within 6 months of approval for everything.
I just note for record that everybody's shaking their head yes. So Sean, does Plan Commission need a formal motion on this?
Yes, the Plan Commission would recommend to the
Oh,
board
yeah, that's right.
approval, including the two conditions, including the modifications we just stated.
Okay. And then Sean, that one is on page 7, correct?
The last page, yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion from the Plan Commission to make a recommendation to the village board as stated in the planner's comments with the two conditions? Sean, are you tightening up are you adding another condition or just tightening?
I'm just going to tighten up number 1 to make all buildings removed within 6 months.
Okay.
Those 4 buildings removed within 6 months, and then a final clause that says, condition 1, basically a sentence on condition 1 that says it shall not apply if they're removed prior to.
Okay, perfect. Does everybody understand what Sean's changing?
And quick question, if we're putting it to within 6 months, then do we put the blanket of, and the bond is based on whatever buildings are remaining? Because right now it says that the bond would be for
Yeah.
9 and 11. So I think if we just couch them all together, put the same end date and then bonding requirement, I think that makes the most sense.
On existing buildings.
Yeah, for any remaining after recording.
What is that 6-month time frame? When does that end?
From board approval, which potentially could be tonight.
So 6 months
No,
from,
but I mean, the removal, what, the end of that 6-month period for removal?
6 months from tonight.
Okay.
any other questions or comments before the Plan Commission moves to make a recommendation to the village board to either approve or deny? Dan?
Planning commission only.
Oh, they don't make a recommendation?
Yeah, the
to board?
waiver is just,
Waivers just.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dan.
I don't make a motion that the village planning commission grants the waiver as submitted with the conditions number 1 and 2 as modified.
Is there a second to Commissioner Noak's motion?
Second.
Commissioner Alex, discussion. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, unanimous. We're done with borders, right?
so yeah, the only comment I want to make is just have your surveyor update the CSM per the technical comments in the staff report and including the note for the wetland waiver on there. So that's all in my staff report. If you have questions, just let me know. You're welcome.
I so appreciate it. This is the third time that we've come back to visit you. Not that I, don't enjoy being here, but thank you so much for everything that you've done. We appreciate it.
Thank you, porters, all the porters that are out there, and Mr. Craig. Thank you so much. You're welcome to
Thank
stay
you.
and hang out if you want, Okay, let's see, the next public hearing we have is for Lori and Vaughn Stock. Mr. and Mrs. Stock, are you here? I'm gonna have you come up, you don't have to say anything or do the opening song, but I'm just gonna have you come up and sit at the table here, and then I'm gonna read your public hearing notice. Just give a minute for everybody to exit.
Yeah. A little conversation going on.
Alrighty. Notice is hereby given the public hearing in the Village of Vernon Plan Commission will be held on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at the Village of Vernon Hall located at W249 South 8910 Center Drive to consider the request for the property owned by Vaughn and Lori Stock for the property located at South 89 West 26540 Edgewood Avenue. Identified the property tax key number VNT 20939890001 to request a waiver under section 300-14 paren A paren 7 of the Village Code specifically for building location per section 314 paren A paren 4 of the Village Code for construction of a new accessory building and an existing accessory structure on the property. All questions were referred to Brad Calder, our clerk administrator, and Brad did publish this in the Freeman on the 26th of April and also posted it in the Village Hall and on the website. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to our planner, Sean Malarkey, to do an overview of Mr. and Mrs. Stock's request, and then we'll come back to you guys. Does that sound good? Sean?
okay, thank you. This is fairly straightforward. This is a 10.16 acre property. It's zoned A5 mini farm district. It's just south of the freeway. Actually, a little corner of the property is on the north side of the freeway, and the remainder of the property is on the south side of the freeway. It never got separated when the freeway came through, apparently. What the petition is proposing is 1,500 square foot accessory building to be used as a horse barn and hay storage. The materials are vertical metal siding with a metal roof, but the barn is quite detailed, like a traditional barn. In my opinion, a very nice building. In addition, the petitioner is also requesting approval of a triangular-shaped wind shelter for the horses on the property. That's 333 square feet. That already exists in the property. So, in essence, there's a few buildings in the property that are in the front yard. Right, the house exists. It's way in the back corner on the north. There's a bunch of buildings that are south of that, and so we require waivers for any building that's in the front yard. There's already a garage on the property. That's about 20 foot by 20 foot existing garage / horse stable, the existing stable that already received a waiver in the past from the town. And so right now, the petitioner is asking for approval for a waiver for this new horse barn and also this existing triangular watering wind shelter for the horses that was constructed previously, and he's asking for a waiver at this point. There's an existing smaller shed that's on the property that's going to be replaced by the new horse barn, and there's one more structure near the west side of the property, which is I don't know, about 12 by 12 foot existing shed or horse shelter to the west. And so that particular one is not part of the waiver request. Everything here is in compliance with the zoning requirements, aside from the request for the waiver in the front yard. The same standards apply as previously mentioned for the waiver in terms of the findings for the Plan Commission, whether or not the waiver or modification if granted would be consistent with the intent of the chapter, whether or not it would adversely affect property owners, whether or not the petitioner the waiver would benefit the petitioner's project in a way that's not inconsistent with the village's interests, whether the petitioner is in full compliance with the applicable ordinances and agreements, whether instead of granting the waiver or modification, the chapter itself should be changed. And so again, the Plan Commission has to consider those, but does not necessarily have to have an affirmative finding for those things. As we previously discussed for the last agenda item, the limit for parcels is 2, unless a waiver is granted by the village. One caveat to this one is that the property is essentially, besides the house in the corner, the vast majority of the property is used for horses, and so horse pastures and horse stable. And so in essence, in my reading of the code, I would define the buildings out there as agricultural buildings because they're for horses. Agricultural buildings, essentially, nothing is counted. The quantity doesn't count for agricultural buildings. It's just the front yard waiver that matters. So we don't, in my opinion, we don't even need to consider a waiver for them being in excess of 2 or the square footage. It's essentially just because they're in the front yard based on how the property and the buildings are used. So quantity doesn't matter and size doesn't matter. It's really just the front yard. Again, any accessory building over 900 square feet does require a deed restriction be placed on it that the buildings cannot be used for any commercial or industrial purpose. The horse barn will be 24.75 feet in height. Normally 18 feet is the limit, but we do allow an increase of 1 foot in height for every 1 foot of additional offset that is maintained. And so from the I-43 corridor, 50 feet is required. They're proposing 57 feet, which more than accommodates the increase in height. And also 50 feet is the requirement for animals, and so that also meets that. So that's all I have. There is a series of standard conditions that we put in here, including the findings of the waiver, including the fact that there's a condition in here that the existing 151 square foot accessory building on the west side shall be removed from the property within 30 days of issuance of the building permit for the 1,500 square foot horse barn, and then the deed restriction so that it's not used for commercial or industrial purposes. So that's all I have.
Mr. and Mrs. Stock, is there anything you wanted to add? Sean gave an overview of your application. Is there anything you'd like to add or share before we go to the Plan Commission?
No, it sounds perfect. That's just what we were looking for.
Okay. Plan Commission members, do you have any questions or board members? I know board members aren't acting, but you're welcome to ask the Stocks any questions that you might have in regards to their request.
I
Trustee
don't have any
Newman?
questions, but I just want to say I've admired your property from the freeway for many years.
Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Stock, didn't you add, wasn't there an issue, didn't you add a little bit of property to your, I don't know if it was in regard, because when that freeway went through, there was a lot of, and I don't know if it had something to do with that, because I know, are you close to the Krickenberg's farm property?
No, but this is actually Mark, my neighbor Mark, and he actually sold me like a
Okay.
1/3 acre pie slice that was really,
Yes, yes.
when it was chopped up by the interstate in the
Right,
60s.
right, yes.
So we fought and we got that taken care of.
All
and
cleaned
it
up?
really cleaned up the property lines and it just made it usable.
Oh, that's good, that's good. I'm sorry.
I have an offer that there's that 1 acre chunk that's landlocked across the interstate. I do have an offer from an adjacent property owner to buy it. But the problem is I've got to call into the surveyor how to create a new tax key number for that so he can buy it. But we'll fight that battle later.
Right. I'm sorry, Plan Commission members or board members, any comments?
Some lucky horses.
Mr. Stock has a lot of money. No, I'm
Why do we have this sketch of the triangular structure?
Well, I drew that up because they wanted something.
The reason was that needs a waiver too. It exists, it's after the fact, but technically it was built without the waiver for the front yard approval, so he's asking for approval. No,
A hard time classifying this as a building, you know,
it's got a roof, so it's
exterior walls.
doesn't matter.
I just wanted to ask, I know you're the only person did you want to, I know just for everybody's, we always notify property owners within 500 feet, and obviously you are. Did you want to add any comments, or are you? Okay. And what is your name, sir? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Mark. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay.
Like he said, the wind shelters, I know it has a roof, but there's no walls to it, it's just there. Higher wind from the freeway, basically.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the ordinance basically defines a building as anything with a roof designed to protect or shelter something from, so that's the bottom line.
So, comments before we go into discussing the waiver? Dan? Besides the lucky horses, I heard.
Well, as far as the intent of our ordinance, they have buildings, accessory buildings out in the front. In this case, it's kind of a unique property.
Right.
The house is way in the back. None of the buildings are in front of any of the neighboring structures.
Right.
Yeah, and they're used for ag purposes, so that's a different.
The intent of the ordinance.
And I think that's a good thing to put in the minutes, a great note, Dan, to put in the minutes of why, if the commission is granting this waiver, not to set bad precedent, but that's a good point to make in the minutes that, where the house is located and where the structures are proposed. Plan Commission members, then, do you want to go through the waiver or modification if it's granted? Do you feel it would be consistent with the general intent of this ordinance? Planning Commission is saying yes. Do you feel it would adversely affect property owners surrounding the area? Plan Commission members are saying no. Would it benefit the petitioner's project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village interests? Okay, and then the petitioner is in full compliance with applicable ordinances and agreements with the village? Yes. And then, as Dan stated, what we talked about, do you feel that the ordinance should be changed or modified to accommodate this type of situation presented by the petitioner? And we'd say no, because we typically don't like to see them, but just for the reasons that Dan stated, that's exactly why we're agreeing that the waiver would be granted. And then, Sean, this is strictly a Plan Commission motion then, correct?
Right, the Plan Commission would approve the waiver.
So Plan Commission members, as stated by our planner on page 4, and I know, Mr. and Mrs. Stock, you've got the conditions. I just wanted to know, is there a motion based upon the planner's 13, is it 12 or 13 comments?
It's 12.
12 comments to approve the accessory building request for Vaughn and Lori Stock for the property located on Edgewood Avenue as stated on the agenda? Is there a motion to that effect of approval?
I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Nowak, it makes the motion with the 12 conditions as stated. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Commissioner Rinaldi. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous, Brad. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Stack. You're done.
Board members, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of like like an old dairy barn where we store the hay up on top and the horses will be in the bottom. Mike, it's Spancrete. And, yeah, that's what we did at our house. I don't know if I have a little garage door down below in the front.
Wouldn't they pour it if it's Spancrete?
They pour concrete on top to make it flat, because Spancrete has a camber to it.
Save the point. Good luck with it.
Can you see that Dan's a former building inspector? You got to watch him.
Yeah? Okay.
Thank you. Good luck, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay, Plan Commission and board members. Sean is going to talk to us now about the discussion and possible amendments to the comprehensive land use plan as it relates to, specific areas that we possibly might look at and the overall comprehensive land use plan. Sean? We'll just give everybody a minute to boogie.
So we've been talking about comprehensive plan updates for a while. It's been in the budget, in the village budget to varying degrees over the years. The last time we looked at it, we made changes back in 2019 where the point of the changes were basically to look around the village of Big Bend because the town at the time was concerned about annexations and things. And so we looked at some of their planned densities in the area and we tried to match them the best we can to kind of thwart annexations at the time. And now that's a moot point because we're a village and we can't be annexed anymore. So that's not necessarily a concern, but things have come up over the years about potential amendments. I know we're looking at the Newman development and the Heim property to the west near the village of McGuanago, which would take some comprehensive plan amendments if that goes anywhere. Mr. Lang was in front of the Plan Commission a couple of months ago about potential amendments for his property on Cartwright Court on 164, which is just south of the village of Big Bend. He wanted to split his property and couldn't do it under the existing zoning or under the existing comprehensive plan. And further north of him in 2019, we did make some changes, near the village, but there's 3 or 4 properties between him and the changes that we last made. He did submit an application for a comprehensive plan amendment to be considered. However, the application didn't include any specifics. It didn't even talk about what he wanted to change to. There's no narrative in terms of the rationale or why, but we did talk about with the Plan Commission last time he was in front of us for the CSM, which got denied, right? And so I think the direction given to him was, well, why don't you take a look at this, maybe talk to your neighbors about some potential changes, because I think the Plan Commission saw it as a good idea maybe for his immediate area up toward the north, toward the village of Big Bend as a potential amendment area. But at this point, I'm not exactly sure what to do with his request. I don't think it's a complete application yet. I guess I'm looking for direction from the Plan Commission and the board as to whether or not we want to look at the whole area. We want to look at his property. Are there other areas we want to look at? I know Karen has talked to Waukesha County about, for the last few years, I've been talking about piggybacking on the county's efforts because they're going to be doing a comprehensive plan amendment for the county, and they do a lot of the legwork in terms of the background demographics and the mapping and all those things. And we could potentially piggyback on that, save some money, and look at our maps and our individual policies for the village, but rely on them to do a lot of the background work and some of the heavy lifting. So I know Karen looked at that, and they're going to start some things, but they're not really going to do much
Till
of the
24.
major stuff till 2024.
Right,
So
right. That's where the county is at
if we're
right
looking
now.
at a major update and we want to piggyback it with the county, we'd be pushing that off. I guess the real action we need to talk about tonight is, that's in the background, but we need to kind of look at this Cartwright property in that immediate area in terms of
Right.
where we go from there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to the Plan Commission and the board since you were here. I mean, I was here when we did the first comprehensive land use plan 100 years ago, and then they did one in 2008, and it hasn't really been updated except for, as Sean stated, right around the Village of Big Bend area.
Right.
And we also looked down National Avenue, did some changes towards New Berlin also.
Yeah.
But the question now, I think if the Newman development, does proceed, Brad's going to give us a report later. That's something we could look at later. But the question is, do you want to look at the area, not just Mr. Lang's property? Do you want staff to look at that particular area, and then with the understanding that we do a full-blown comprehensive land use plan in 2024? What I'd like to get to the Plan Commission also is the county did a real detailed report of, it's a business plan for all of Waukesha County, and Vernon's not mentioned quite as extensively. There's no sewer and water in Vernon. So, I mean, the pressures for business development aren't in our community because we don't have the facilities to.
This is the one that was done a few years back.
Right. But like Sean had said, the background work to that comprehensive plan that the county's going to do is a benefit to Sean. Otherwise, Sean has to do it. But I just wanted to know what your feeling was. Do you think we need to get on it right away this year? Do you want to look at pieces? What's the Plan Commission and board members' opinions?
If I could interrupt before you get into it, I would just say, looking at the plan, we've made some changes over time. I don't think there's a ton that's out of whack
Right.
in the current comprehensive plan. It's been working so far. There's areas that have come up where we've had some considerations on the edges of other communities where we've talked about it. I know there's a couple areas that I have my eye on, but as a whole, I wouldn't say let's change the whole thing just
Right.
to change it. I mean, we're not. I think the position of the town and now the village has always been, let's let property owners develop fairly according to the context of their surroundings, but we're not looking to push development or density just for the sake of having development and density, right? I mean, it's always been where it makes sense and and equitable. And so I'm not even sure where I'd start outside of a few properties and few locations in making blanket changes. So I just want to lead with that. You may have other ideas, but it's worked so far.
I know you mentioned the Lang property. Are there others that
Well, then
require us to look at certain properties and maybe consider changes?
definitely. Well, the Newman property, the Newman Hine property that I mentioned, that's on the border with the village. That will require an amendment. Doesn't have to be part of a concerted big plan, but we can amend the map anytime we want with a Class 1 30-day notice. So there's that area. There's potentially the Presbyterian Church area where their parcel at the corner right across from Quick Trip there. That's currently planned. Public institutional or government institutional that might have a better business use for that property. I know there's been people asking about that property in the past, so that's potential. But other than that, there really isn't a lot of areas that are just jumping out at me.
What I would suggest is maybe just have Sean take a look at certain areas and maybe make a recommendation. Or
Could do that. So
we could incorporate it with the county when we go into that, if we go in.
Well, and the reason I ask is I watched the last Plan Commission member meeting when Mr. Lang came forward, and it appeared that the Plan Commission didn't have anything against looking at doing a modification in that area. Not just Mr. Provencher has been calling for years. I don't know how Mr. Cartwright feels, Mr. Miller, the Torbitts. I'm just thinking of the property owners in that it would be everything kind of north of the Siege Paintball. I know Siege Paintball or the Manies have no desire to do any density changes or land use plan changes.
it's sort of broken up and fragmented in that area anyways, which might lead itself to being suburban density residential, which is the category to the north that surrounds Big Bend. I guess the question I have though is, he wanted to divide his property. He submitted an application for a comprehensive plan. Is the village footing the bill for my time? Is he footing the bill for the time? I mean, who should be doing that?
Well, I mean, obviously, Mr. Lang is interested in his property, but I don't think it's fair just to look at a property.
He's not pressuring us at this time to make
Oh, he applied, but he had a incomplete,
Yeah,
very
incomplete
incomplete application. So, I mean, he's
He
welcome.
wants it changed. Obviously, he
Right.
wants to divide the property. He wants it changed. We talked about it, but that doesn't mean we have to even take his application to the plan commission. We could just look at the area and, and take a peek at it. And then
You know what he wants to change to, or just?
it would be the suburban density, which would be the one to the north, which would make sense.
He just
Um,
wants to split it.
But I wouldn't change his property without also looking at the ones around it, because it would just be, there's a bunch of others that would make sense. And suburban density is, it's a maximum, it requires 1.5 acres of land up to 4.9 acres of land for each residential unit you create. So he's got a 4.9 acre property. He wants to split it in two. That would suffice for him to be able to do that. Some of those other properties might not be able to even be split because they're already too small anyways, even though they're zoned.
Yeah, not enough
rural
frontage or
residential.
whatever, yeah.
Right. So it's not going to affect too much because they're already fairly divided. There's a couple properties that might get a split or two in that area, but it's honestly not that big of a deal in
But at
terms
least-
of changes.
At least we'd give the other property owners notification. And
They
the-
would, it's a notice. We would notice them.
Right. But the question is, do you want Mr. Lang to take the lead, or does the village want to take a look at this specific area and bring some comments back to Plan Commission, and Plan Commission make a recommendation to the village board? Any discussion on that? Mike?
If it's something where we're looking at an area, like we said, if it's radiating out of Big Bend, I think a resident coming and just requesting something and saying, hey, you guys are going to pay for it is more difficult than saying, yes, that is an area, we just haven't gotten to it yet. So if we have areas like that, I think that that's something that, if we as Vernon invest in so that the residents can invest in the properties, I think that makes sense. Outside, well, I have a couple other comments in general, but if we're talking about this one request, I think that it's something where if there is something where we see an impact on a handful of properties, that would be a burden that we could take on as far as that legwork. But if it's, one property, I think that that's, hard to justify.
Right.
If it's, a single property.
And we wouldn't know without letting.
So, to that point, the Newman property, for instance, I don't think we should touch that until they come in with a development proposal, then we can look at the comp plan. Same thing with the Presbyterian Church area, that if someone looks to pursue a commercial development on that property, we can do the comp plan and the rezoning at that time. But again, this is a bit of a node here, so I kind of agree.
Mike?
So just getting back to like the general scope, one thing that we haven't talked about that I know is the board level with their last meeting, municipal development. What are we going to do as far as municipal campuses, or how are we going to develop? That would be into that comp plan where we have to say, hey, where do we want to see development? Where do we as Vernon want to develop? So that other people then come and invest and develop around those areas. So I think that municipal side would be something to consider. I like piggybacking off the county. Why do the work that they're going to do? They have the resources to do it, so why wouldn't we take advantage of it? And yeah, the other ones I already addressed.
Yeah, and Jason Fruth and Dale Shaver both had said at any time if we need any help, they've been awesome, and we are going to piggyback as soon as we can get some money to. We have 24 boxes of stuff that has to be scanned in, and we're going to use their GIS system so that residents, the planner, the building inspector can go on their GSI website and look at documents, building permits. So that'll be a plus because we can't afford to have that type of system with our budgets. But like I said, when Sean and I were talking, and Brad, we were kind of brainstorming. Should we go full board into a comprehensive land use plan at this time when we know full well that a lot of the information that Sean's going to need in that document of a full-blown, which I agree we should do in 2024 if we can. But
and there may be things the county doesn't do that we'll have to supplement, but they're going to do the bulk of the legwork. We're going to set our own policies, obviously, our own land use policies and all that stuff. But the background, all the data and all that would be great to, and the overall mapping would be great to have from them. So it sounds like I should take a look at the area around the Lang property in terms of a recommendation. I could bring it back to the Plan Commission. If it looks okay, then we could set a public hearing and go forward. And then that requires a recommendation from the Plan Commission and then the board as well
Well, then
for
again,
changes.
We don't have to take any action on unless he's pressing us to do that.
Right.
If
Right.
we Wait until 2024 and work with the county on the whole thing.
We could, or we could just amend the map too. I mean, that's your prerogative to do.
If we amend the map and the usage, how much time will we saving that property owner from,
How much money, for instance?
or in time?
I don't know. It's gonna.
Presbyterian Church too, you know, their property.
Yeah.
Change that.
Presbyterian would be easy. That'd
you
be,
know, versus them coming, you know, versus
Right.
waiting for them to come in and say, hey, we want to change this.
right.
How much of the time frame is that for?
Well, the Presbyterian Church, I think, is a little different from what the other ones are in terms of the Presbyterian Church, the land use is institutional, but the zoning is B2.
Right.
So, and they have the non-conforming use of residential. So unless somebody wants to change it from either the non-conforming residential or comply with the B2, they can do that. But if they want something outside of either of those, that's where then that would trigger the comp plan amendment. And we've had conversations with interested parties who've wanted to purchase the property. But in the last week and a half, we haven't heard anything from anybody. So,
I'm just saying.
But it's a couple month process. So it's essentially, it's a 30-day notice for the public hearing, then the Plan Commission takes action on it, and then the board doesn't actually approve it by ordinance for a month later. So it's a minimum 2 months, could be more if there's conceptual stuff ahead of that.
Saying too, half the time, what we're.
Jeff, can you
guessing-
talk into your microphone? Sorry.
I'm saying half the time, what we're guessing to change it to might not be what the
May not be,
correct either, so.
right.
Yeah, because you wouldn't do something that's inconsistent with the rest of the surrounding properties.
I would certainly say let's wait on those properties. This one's a little different.
This one meaning the Lang.
The Lang
Yes.
one. I'm looking at my screen, which is not up there.
Do we know if any of the other neighbors are looking for a change on that?
Well, Mr. Provencher has called in the past maybe about 10 times,
And where is that property?
right next door.
north. And you can explain, you know the backstory much better.
Yeah, well, and the Henderson property. There's quite a few property owners that, it'd be interesting to see. I know Mr. Lang has wanted to split his property for quite some time. And I feel bad when we were looking at his property's not that far from where we looked previously. And some of the properties that are across the street from him will never divide again because they're right on the river.
Yeah, they're wet.
So, I personally wouldn't have any objection to Sean taking a look at that and bringing the information back to the Plan Commission and get your thoughts after he takes a little deeper look into that area with multiple property owners, not just Mr. Lang.
Right. Yeah, again, it is fragmented. It kind of makes sense to change it, but I'll take a look at it and bring something back.
So any other comments? Brad, I'm sorry, any other comments?
No, I think Sean and I have talked about the Provencher property, and Karen and I have talked about the Provencher property, and I think his biggest challenge is his desire to do what he wants to do is limited by what he already has on the parcel.
Right.
So he could get the land use changed, but I don't think.
It's going to help them. That happens a lot when we do, people want to do certain things. And of course, I think Plan Commission and board members want to be accommodating, but we also have to, follow what our ordinances and, if they're wrong, they're wrong. But, we have ordinances and policies and guidelines for a specific reason. But, so, Mario, did you want to add something?
Well, I just, my inclination is if you kind of see a segment of property owners thinking generally in a certain direction, it would be good to oversee that before we get hit with individual requests.
And I think Sean's comment too about the overall comprehensive land use plan. If you look at Vernon, we kind of wanted the development to be in the northern part, the eastern part of am I thinking right, of the village, and where our prime farmland is, we wanted to, that's where you get the 80-10s, or because of the soils, we wanted to try to preserve those, not take away their property rights, but try to preserve that rural farmland as long as we could, with the understanding that, they have property rights also, but like I said, when Jason and Dale said how much work the county's gonna do on their, land use plan county-wise, I was hoping that you concurred that we wait till they do a lot of that legwork that we can use to justify our comp plan.
And which they may be, when they start to do that, they're going to probably look for input from us too, to attend meetings and that kind of a thing as
Right.
well. So, I mean, I'm always happy to attend, but other plan commissioners or board members, they may be asking for some of that involvement too.
Right.
And I think the one thing I heard you say, Karen, was Vernon wasn't mentioned in the county plan. I think that Vernon needs to be a part of it to, capitalize on some of the resources that we have.
Right.
So we're not an afterthought, or we're not a McWanago, Big Bend, and where is Vernon? What is Vernon?
Right. I agree 100%. Other comments? Then Sean, you got a good direction?
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Brad, if Sean needs help, you're gonna help him? Okay, under the president's report, Brad, I'm gonna turn to you on the Newman, development, if you wanna give an update on that one.
So no, just a quick update on this. I did hear from Newman Development and one of the representatives last week. They still plan to move forward with the development over there. So that's going to be moving. They're looking to hopefully have breaking ground, having homes go up, starting in 24. So there's still time, but as Sean has alluded to already, there's comp plan amendment, some rezoning stuff that needs to get taken care of. Plus, there's the discussions on the other items that are somewhat related to some of the stuff on here, development agreements and things like that that need to be addressed. So I think the village board will start having discussions on some of the stuff, specifically utility stuff and things like that, here in the coming months, so we can start working with McWanago on that to get this moving, so that Newman can break ground in 24 and get going on this.
Thank you, Brad. I know, John, in the attorney's comments, we're not supposed to talk about open discussion, so I just wanted to state that the reason the checklist development, it's been on the agenda forever, and the intent there was to bring in the attorney, the engineer, the planner, the administrator, the building inspector, and what we were going to do on those two items is create a checklist and create a developer's agreement that's a good working document for the village. And so that was the intent of that was to develop that, bring it to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission could tweak it a little further, bring it to the board after that. So I just wanted to let you know that that's what the intent is to have staff bring a good checklist development to the Plan Commission and board, and a good developers agreement. We have a developers agreement, but we've had a couple little glitches there, so we wanted to perfect that and then bring that to the Plan Commission and village board. Does that sound agreeable to? Okay, and then the last item, not that you have to do anything, but this is the before and after. The 4-page document is the one that has all, just keep that for your resources. It's all the conditional uses we got from Waukesha County, and there's a lot of annexed property, wrong properties, whatever. And then the 2-page, it's got a little 3-page. That's the document that I'd like to work with Sean a little bit further. There's some questions that I need to ask him in regards to some of those properties. And what I'd like to do is, after I take it one step further with working with Sean and Brad, bring it back, because eventually, I just wanted to state for the record that none of these conditional uses, with the exception of the Halverson House, none of these have ever had a review from the county, the town, or the village, except for the one. So eventually, some of these people will have to correspond with further, because they haven't responded, and we'll do that internally at the village. But like I said, what I'd like to do is, work with Sean and Brad just to create a little bit more modifications on the final, do the mailing, and then bring it back, because eventually what I'd like the Plan Commission to do is, and board, is to review, especially the campground. I think I haven't reviewed, to be perfectly honest, I have not reviewed their conditional use. It's so old, it might have a provision in there that there is no review and it can change owners. But there's people on the campground, we've never had a problem, but it's 2 owners ago, so I mean, that's how old some of these are. So we don't have to do anything, it's just for your, I wanted, for the record, what we have, so I have to work with Sean and Brad a little bit further, but eventually, when we get it all cleaned up, it'll come back to you on what we have to do with the ones that are in the village, and what procedure do we follow, and I'm real concerned about that, because we've had town and county conditional uses that had to do a village conditional use, and the fees that those people incurred on taking it from a town and county to a village were astronomical. So, I mean, that's something I want to be sensitive to, not from Sean, but I mean, that's something we can talk about further, but I just wanted you to have this document so that you know it's living and breathing and changing, and it'll change again.
Say, Karen?
Yes.
I'm behind you a little bit, but still on 11. This checklist conversation?
Mm-hmm.
My 2 cents is something like that. You do need to have, people in a room or whatever working on, but it's always best done in real time to try to use it before you approve it. If there's a way to let people dry run it, as opposed to just sitting in a room, sipping coffee, talking about it, it always works better to do it for real.
I know I had a couple examples. I mean, this is how long this goes back. Sean, you had sent something over too on a checklist.
Right there. The village has had checklists in the past, or various forms of checklists, but it was, they've worked okay. Some of them are not complete. It was just thought that we'd consolidate them and come up with something really good, so that there's no missteps, obviously, when developments come forward. We know exactly what to do and when to do it, and who's responsible for what part of it. And
Right, and with technology too, we can create a spot on the website that the planner, the engineer, the attorney, the building inspector can look what's been done where, and so that there's Brad, if he's got to check something, there's accountability and documentation of what's being done and when, or if there's a glitch, or
I think President Fordner all along was kind of hoping to piggyback it with the Newman development when that came along. So that was his thought, is that it would be developed in conjunction with that as that came through.
You would like a good actor to dry run with.
Right. So that might still be possible to,
Right.
come up with a draft and then
Right.
That is.
and then use it with them and fine tune it. Right?
well, that was the purpose of having the attorney, the engineer, the planner, the administrator, the DPW director, the building inspector, all those players, because each one of them has a different component as it relates to whatever the development it is.
But not finalize it until we get to dry run
Right.
it through
Right.
something else. Yeah.
Further discussion? Did I miss anything on the checklist or developers agreement, guys? I know we.
On the conditional usage, Karen, under action, some of them were approved and others are just blank. What
Is that the?
what are the blank ones?
Let's see. On the first one or the second one?
Either one. Even on the second one, you got action on top. Some of them say approved.
Oh, the ones on the very, very bottom?
No, all over.
All of them.
Please have a color code.
It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 7th column.
Oh, this is, yeah.
Where it says action on top. Way on top of the page.
Oh, yeah, but there's another action. Do you see that? I just went by this one on column, no, because it was the town had to do action and then the county. So that's the one. I'll just move those over. In fact, yeah, I'll just move you see where they are approved on the final columns? I went off of that.
Oh, and on the very east, right?
Yeah, if you go to the very, very far side.
Town hearing, town plan commission, town plan, yeah.
Then it went to the county, went to Loopy. I mean, when we were a town, it went to the plan commission, the village board, then it went to Loopy, the plan commission, county board. I mean, there were like 18 steps for a development when we were a town. So that's why So I'll clean that up but I'd like to talk with Sean before I,
Why were they issued a number for a conditional use if they were denied?
that's how the county did their records. And then, and like I said, I know the county did not scan in any of the conditional use permits. I know the county has scanned in all their Board of Appeals and zoning, but, so none of this, all this stuff has to be scanned in, all what's relevant. I mean, there's things that are in the Village of Mukwonago and Village of Big Bend that were on the old sheet also, but I'll update that. But I do, because the most important is that final column when they were
Yeah, okay.
more so than what happened because I can't remember if the plan commission, if the town approved something, the county always did. They might have put more conditions. They normally did put a lot more conditions, but
Do we have copies of all of those with their conditions?
Mm-hmm. they have to, like I said, they're in, I think I picked up 24 boxes of material that has to be scanned in. Yeah, so. Mike?
So is there a single conditional use permit that someone is issued and executed, or are there two separate where Vernon, whether back then a town issued one and then the county, or is there a single conditional use?
Yep, all
I think
county.
For me, knowing that there's, West Dallas Training Kennel Club, there is the backstory of 6, if that were, a single and hidden those other cells to know, okay, this is the one that's enforced. There were all these iterations to get to that point, but then this is the file number.
Right.
Like Dan was saying, go to the file to get the conditional use for West Dallas Kennel Club. If we had that as kind of that point of reference, knowing again that all that happened in the background.
Right, because I know, I know we're off subject a little bit, but I know Heaven City at one point had 28 conditional use permits for the specific uses. I'm not kidding. Yeah, on their property, and then when we cleaned it up, now they're down to 1, but there were 28 on one property. So that's some of the things. I mean, I'd like to keep that information for historical purposes, but it's irrelevant now because all those 28 are now into one conditional use. But
in your research, has subsequent conditional uses, like I see in here, adding an accessory building or those types of things, let's say that it's an operation and they're making changes. The conditional use always has the original ingredient list, so to speak, the original conditions, and it's amended to include the last one. So the living document is the last issued one?
right.
Is that, or does it some say it's amending it, so it's,
That's,
you have to look at this plus this one page?
Attorney Macy likes to create a new document each time, so that's how we've been doing it. In the past, it's been addendum, but we try to just take all the conditions previously and just make a new one.
So some of these might have that where it's a single document, and then all of a sudden items 2, 3, and 7 don't apply because they're amended.
Yes, exactly.
And Attorney Macy indicated that we have one CU for a dog kennel on National Avenue, and the CU reads that if that person meets each of the items that listed in that, it can change from property owner. That's how old it is. It's very, very old. That if that property owner does exactly what the previous property owner did in their kennel, they don't have to come in. They just sign something that their site plan of operation are exactly what the person did in 1972. There's very few of those, but we do have a couple out there.
Right.
So that's all I have there, gentlemen, and then where do we go from here? Oh, if there's no other comments, then we're looking for approval of the minutes of April 12th. Joint Plan Commission and Village Board minutes. Brad, you're going to change my signature on there, aren't you? Not the minutes. It looks like I'm from China.
Oh, did it upload weird?
You must have.
It's on board then, was it? We weren't on yet.
You were, yeah, you weren't.
No, and neither was Jeff.
I mean, I listened to the meeting, so is there a motion from the Plan Commission for approval of the minutes of April 12th.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from April 12th as submitted.
Okay, and is there a second, Mario?
Sure.
I got a question. Can we even pass the minutes if it's just Jim and I? And I'm the only one here?
I was at that meeting. I mean, I
Oh,
watched
okay.
the whole meeting, so I'm gonna vote on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you can even though you weren't.
Right, and a board, even, I mean, typically you'd like to be there, but
We can make it work? All right.
You're
I
making-
was just wondering.
you're banking, I mean, I know Brad took, his minutes are, and you also saw, John had just a couple changes that Brad did too, so, I mean, I have full faith in the minutes, so,
Yeah, absolutely. I was just curious.
yeah. So I have a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the Plan Commission motion on approval of the minutes, April 12th? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. All in favor, all opposed? No.
Yeah.
Is there a motion for the village board to approve the April 12th joint village board and Plan Commission
Make
minutes?
that motion.
And I'll second Dylan's motion. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye, just so it passes.
Okay. 3, and then, Gary, are you abstaining?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
feel more comfortable doing it.
Oh,
I don't know
that's fine,
anything- I don't know
'cause
anything
you're
about
not getting
that meeting.
fired.
I don't know anything about that meeting, yeah. I don't know anything about that meeting.
No, we need to address that.
All right, guys, so now I would entertain a motion from the Plan Commission to adjourn. Plan Commission, does anybody want to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned for Plan Commission Village Board for this meeting. Excuse me, Trustee Newman is moving to adjourn. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Second by Trustee Finch. Hearing, and any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Village Board, you are adjourning from
No,
this,
we
but
got-
you're hanging in there. We have a quick meeting after this. Just a quickie. But we won't,
that bridge.
if you guys don't mind, we won't do the pledge. No,
Oh, we don't.
we just did that. so.
It's a continuation.
We approved it based on his review.
Does anybody need a quick break before we jump into the next meeting, or what do you want to do, guys?
Let's keep it moving.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, so I'm former Congressman Mark Newman's first cousin once removed.
So it won't be awkward at holiday gatherings. Won't see him, yeah.
We don't do a whole lot of that anymore. Much of our family has moved away and we're all busy. But yeah, no, I haven't seen Mark in years. But yeah, you'll see if you